Good evening. I am Justice Wilma Guzman, current board member of the Latino Judges Association and past president. Today I have the distinct honor of interviewing the Honorable Lucindo Suarez, Supreme Court Justice of the State of New York, presently presiding in Bronx County, and the state coordinating judge for the summary jury trial. It is with great pleasure I welcome you, Judge Suarez.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And today we're just going to have a one-on-one interview to preserve this so in the future our younger generation could see one of our trailblazers and what it took to get to where you are and those that are going to follow it takes to get to.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm more than happy to be an actual part of it.
So thank you. So let's start. Can you just give us a little background as to where you were born and raised?
I was born in the island of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez. I was brought to the United States about a year and a half after I was born in 1951 to New York City, and I was raised by a single mother.
Okay, and I understand that having been raised also the same. And also give us some information as to your educational background.
I went to the New York City public schools, went to Theodore Roosevelt High School. I graduated with an average of about 85, and I only met with my high school counselor once for about 3 minutes.
Well, I got to interject. I am also a graduate of Theodore Roosevelt High School, and I'm learning this for the first time today.
Yeah,
so see,
that's great.
This interview gave me some information about Judge Suarez and I. Go ahead.
In any event, I graduated Theodore Roosevelt in 1969 and went right across the street to Fordham University Rose Hill campus.
And how was that experience?
It was great. It really was. It was an active time. Vietnam War was on. I had my draft card. I was ready to go. There was an actual lottery then, and my number was about 2 or 3 points above, so I did not have to go. And I was married at the time, so I thank God that I did not have to go. But if I was called, I was ready to go.
Okay, well, thankfully you didn't go, but you were willing to go. Now, during your years in Fordham, did you have any role models or mentors?
Not really. It was a time when the higher education institutions were first opening their doors to minorities. Indirectly, yes, Aspira. Aspira was always there. They were always pushing. And if it was not for Aspira, I don't think that I would be where I am today.
And how, either with the help of Aspira or even through Fordham University, what made you decide to go on to law school?
I never had plans about the law. I always wanted to be a high school English teacher. Unfortunately, senior year, all of the education courses were filled. I had a very severe case of senioritis, and many of my friends were applying to law school. And I said to myself, wow, law school, let me try it. I applied, I got in to the University of Pennsylvania, and it was tough, but I made it.
Away from home. How
Yes.
was that?
It was tough. Brand new city, brand new everything. I mean, I really did not know what the law school experience was like. I had to learn everything from scratch. However, I was always dedicated. I was always hardworking, did what I had to do, and I graduated.
Great. And what was after law school your first job experience or your first experience into the workforce in law?
completely solo private practice. Me, myself, and I. Law office. Within a law office, my office was essentially 10 feet by 10 feet, and my two reliant aspects that helped me were number one, an IBM Selectric 2 typewriter with a self-correcting feature, and my answering machine. And I was in solo private practice. I was out there in the courts with clients, and every evening came back to the office, made sure I answered each and every call.
Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because of that experience practicing law. We'll get into being a judge, but practicing law the way you did, and now practicing, seeing what attorneys have to go through now with the virtual. What kind, I'm bringing you out of your element from the judiciary, but how would that have been if you put yourself in that spot now? I had to ask that question. I mean, you just put me right into that spot.
It is like night and day. Then everything was face to face. You met with your client, you had to build a particular relationship with your client. You had to meet with your adversaries, of course, in and out of court with the judges. Now it's a new, different world, especially with this particular pandemic. I mean, practically most of the work can be done virtually. And it is easier, it is more streamlined, it does save a lot of money, but there's that missing aspect of the nature of the individual and getting to know them and just going through the actual interpersonal aspects.
It's the connection. It's what we're feeling right now, which is why I asked that question. It's what's missing. I understand.
And interestingly, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when somebody sees that interview, they will say, "What are they talking about?"
Exactly. Maybe, but I had to bring it out. It was so important. Now, what led you then into deciding or discovering that, you know what, maybe the judiciary is the journey now I want to take?
It was a pure political decision. I was involved in the politics a great deal. I knew every elected official, from the city council to the New York State Assembly to the New York State Senate. I did election law work, et cetera, et cetera. So practically every politician knew who I was, and they knew that I was a hard worker. So eventually it came to pass that they wanted me to become a judge. I initially said no, but ultimately I said, okay, I'm going to do it.
Great. And did you have to go through an election process or an appointment process?
It was an elected process, and in any election, if you have opponents, it's going to be expensive. You have to fundraise. You got to be out there. Then anyway, putting up posters and taking down posters. Now there are rules that they cannot be put up. But in those days, that was very, very big. Palm cards, knocking on doors, presentations, speeches, etc., etc.
And what court was that you were running for, your first court?
That was the Bronx Civil Court.
Okay, and naturally you were successful.
I was.
And how was your first experience? Well, let me just go back. For how long of a term was that court?
That is an elected term for 10 years.
And how was that experience during that 10-year period?
I knew that I was going to do well because in my private practice, I saw that the civil court, not only in the Bronx, but in the other New York City boroughs as well, I saw that there was a sort of reticence that the judges and the court staff were not working as expeditiously as they should. I have always been a hard worker, and I knew that once I was in there, that I would do well.
Very good. And did you serve the entire 10-year term, or did something happen
I
in between?
did not. I did
And
not.
what happened?
After 2 years, I was nominated for the Bronx Supreme Court, and I was successful there as well.
And what's the length of the term for Bronx Supreme Court?
Bronx Supreme Court is 14 years.
And you were successful at that election also?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And just gives a little background as to what Bronx, rather the Supreme Court level, what that entails.
It's a court of a higher jurisdiction involving a lot more different cases where you have unlimited monetary jurisdiction, and you can have any kind of case. And I had quite a few interesting ones, and I was in the Bronx Supreme Court for 5 years. And then I was tapped to go to the appellate term, which is a junior appellate court.
That's where I want to get to. While sitting in the Supreme Court, you have then, and this is where the trailblazer comes in, have been appointed to several trailblazing, appointments. And that's what I want you to get into. What those appointments were and entailed, and what did they mean to you? And I know it's several questions in one, which I shouldn't be asking, but I am. And how they impacted you and the community.
Many different cases, of course. One of which...
Well, first of all, what were the appointments?
Are you saying the appointment when I was a Supreme Court judge?
No, after.
I'm sorry.
Your prestigious appointments. The appellate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't be modest.
Appellate term is a court that there is no election. There is an appointment. And the powers that be within OCA, acronym for Office of Court Administration, which is the administrative arm of the New York State courts, decided that I would be a good candidate for this particular court, called the appellate term, which is a junior appellate court, which reviews the decisions of the civil court and the criminal courts.
Right, but you were the first Latino, which is where the trailblazing come in. So let's not be modest.
Yes and no.
But
Luis Gonzalez was the first.
Correct.
Who was appointed to the appellate term. First department.
Right.
First department being Bronx and Manhattan. I was the second. However,
this is where the trailblazing comes in.
That's correct. However, I was the first presiding justice, PJ, which is an honorific title, but you are essentially the lead judge of that court, something similar to Judge Roberts on the United States Supreme Court. He's the chief judge there. My title then is not chief judge, but the presiding judge. And Luis Gonzalez never was the PJ of the appellate term, but he became PJ of the appellate division. However, I was the first Latino PJ of any appellate court.
Which again, therefore, the trailblazing for that court.
Thank you.
Both were trailblazers because that, again, Luis Gonzalez is another trailblazer.
Yes, he was.
For our court system. So, rightfully so, you both have the respective honors of being PJs of those respective courts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Just how does or how did or continues your heritage in any way play a role in your experience as a judge?
Indirectly, I believe that as a judge, you should still have other means or other avenues of helping your particular community, whether it is individuals, groups, or others. And since I've always wanted to be a high school English teacher, but I never had the opportunity, at least I worked as a volunteer faculty for 7 semesters at Malcolm King College, and then for 7 years at Bronx Community College, teaching paralegal studies, where I left as a tenured associate professor. And although that is outside of being a judge, I love doing that because 4 of my former students graduated Bronx Community College, graduated a 4-year college, got accepted to law school, graduated law school, and one of them appeared before me as a judge. So I am truly proud of that moment.
And that is an impact that you have on our community. And also being a former paralegal, it really serves the community and having them go forward. It's like putting your hand behind you and pulling them up with you. And
Pushing it forward.
yes, and that's very important, so and very commendable. Now, how important would you say it is for the litigants to see when they come before the courts people that look like them?
Absolutely. It sort of shows, hey, we are part, although that particular judge is of my same ethnicity, that should not matter, but at least there will be that understanding, okay, and that respect, which I have of anyone who actually comes before my court, whether they are black, brown, yellow, multicolor, gay, LGBT, whatever it is. We are the courts. We represent what justice should be, and anyone who comes before us should be treated the same way. However, those individuals who have traditionally not seen their own up there and seeing them there will at least feel that they are part of our larger society.
It's a big community, and that's the community the courts should also represent. Now, do you have a memorable, and I'm sure there are a lot of them, but maybe one memorable moment or matter that comes to mind that stands out throughout your career?
There is. Interestingly, this came about 20 years ago or so, which is something that is happening today, 2022. And that is assigned counsel. The assigned counsel program are lawyers that are assigned by the court to represent an indigent criminal defendant or someone within the actual family court that cannot afford a lawyer. 20 years ago, that was a big issue, and the courts were slowly grinding to a halt because lawyers were no longer taking these cases because the lawyers were getting paid $40 an hour for in-court work and $25 an hour for out-of-court work. So you had less and less lawyers taking these cases, and the actual inventory of these courts could not move steadily along. It was a big problem. The case came before me. I had a trial of about 2.5 months. I had over 40 witnesses. Eventually, I ruled that the 18B statute, which sets the actual rates, was unconstitutional as applied. And I declared that unconstitutional, and I, as a judge, raised it on my own to $90 an hour, whether it's in or out of court, whether it's family court or it is criminal court, until, and that's the key, until the legislature acts, because I, as a judge, am not a legislator. But since the legislature was not doing its job and bringing the courts almost to a grinding halt, I felt that I did have that responsibility, which I exercised, declaring the law unconstitutional until the legislature acted. And lo and behold, the legislature acted within 30 days. And there was one lawyer that submitted his voucher before then, and he got paid $90 an hour.
Wow.
If anybody knows who that lawyer is, please let me know so that I can get my 10%. I'm kidding, of course, I'm kidding.
But that, I could see how that becomes very memorable and important, because it's a continuing issue.
It's happening again.
And it is happening again 20 years later. Now, if there was a quote or a statement that you could leave our viewers with, so they could remember you by, what would that statement or quote be?
Wow. The one that I attempt every day when I do any judicial act, duty, is number one, to be true to myself and follow justice. And I believe it is easier than most people think. First, you read the law, whether it's a statute or case law. And by reading it, if what is happening is different, then you have the opportunity to change. Judges cannot pick their particular cases. A case comes to them. Let me give you one brief example. Years ago, I would say, 25, 30 years ago, if a tenant was in an illegal apartment, they did not have to pay rent. And for the landlord to get them out, they would have to start what is called an ejectment action, not in landlord-tenant, because it is not an actual proceeding. Therefore, many savvy tenants who, for whatever reason, did not want to pay the rent and stay there rent-free had to wait a long time, because the lawyer now had to go to Supreme Court, which takes a longer time, it's more money, etc. So this one particular case, the lawyer said, "Judge, allow me to go to civil court. It'll be easier." I read the statute and the lawyer was right. Supreme Court and civil court, I ruled, have concurrent jurisdiction over an ejectment action where the assessed valuation is less than $25,000.
Correct.
And assessed valuation is a lot lower than market value, of course.
Correct.
But in this case, it was a two-family home. We checked it out. The assessed valuation was less than $25,000. So therefore, this lawyer could bring his case in the civil court. I was in the civil court at the time. So I said, yes, you can bring an ejectment action in my court, the civil court, and you do not have to go to Supreme. After that ruling, I got so much pushback. They said, how can you do this? For years, it's always been housing court. And I said, the statute says civil court concurrent jurisdiction. They were right. I'm sorry. I was right. I was proved right. And ever since then, I have had the opportunity to change the trajectory of the law somewhat. And I truly believe that that is one of the most satisfying things that any judge can do, is to change the law's trajectory in such a way that it should be and where it helps everybody.
So what I'm hearing is apply yourself, do your homework, understand what's before you, and then you can really do some justice in the
Without
cases.
fear or favor.
Yeah, okay. I must say it's been a pleasure having this interview with you today. I learned that we're both Theodore Roosevelt graduates, so that was something very interesting. And it's an honor having you as a colleague in Bronx County and a friend.
Thank you, Wilma.
Thank
Most
you.
appreciated.
Yeah, and thank you for being a part of the Latino Judges Association. And I hope everyone enjoyed this interview. Thank you.
Thanks.